And then we get the African influence. Dominica was colonized very late, so you know, from in at least the English-speaking Caribbean, and in fact the French as well, from the 1620s is when you're getting settlement in places like St. Kitts and Barbados and whatever, and then the arrival of the enslaved African from various sources, and I always have to remind people that they're coming from a coastal region of some 2,000 miles with various tribal groups and ethnic groups and language groups and so on. It's not a monolithic Africa. So you get all of these styles then being adapted. And in a way, they're remembering their pattern of building in West Africa and in the interior, and they are adapting it to the reality, because it was their responsibility as far as the plantation holders were concerned. That was the area where the enslaved people lived, and you actually were responsible for putting up your own house. And so, thanks to a lot of the excavation, the archaeological work that is being done by a guy called Zach Baer up at the Cabrits on the slave village there, and also Mark Hauser down in a number of places, up at Sugarloaf in the north, and also at Mont Patat, particularly in the south, and also at Petit Coulibré as well. We get an understanding of how these slave houses were built and existed. And it followed that African pattern of having these panels of what we call in Creole golette, those thin strips of stems of wood. And the kai golette, as it is called, essentially is made up of all these golettes that are woven, and they're put in panels, and then mud is spread over them, and usually they were whitewashed as well. The archaeologists find the whitewash stuck to some of the clay, so you have all of these indications. And then now they continue to be used well up into the early 20th century. In fact, as a boy in the 1950s, 60s, I remember them in places like Coulby There was one down by the bay in what is today Jimit. These thatched houses with their golette sides. All of this, of course, coming from the landscape. Once again, a knowledge of the landscape. And the archaeologists then sift through all of this and are able to indicate how these things were developed, and the photographs that go with them are very useful. So the photograph that we have closer to me over here is from the west coast in the area of Collyho, and then the one at the end over there is at Petit Coulibré. Luckily, all well recorded by the photographer who visited Dominica. And then this now is Lago in Portsmouth. We get the kai golette and placed on the ground, moving up with a wooden floor and with the basic wooden strips cut, and the thatch remains. And then eventually, of course, the thatch becomes shingles, and as the 20th century progresses, the shingles become galvanized. But elements remain very strong. Like in this diagram, which I put together, linking work that was done by Douglas Taylor, and also by John Imrie, an amazing contributor to Dominica on health and botany and everything else that John Imrie did, recording the types of wood and what they were best for. So I did this little diagram for my book Island Culture in 1988, and you see the combination of the frames, the caconnier shingles, the mangrove pillars on which the house rested, because the man was best suited to cope with the moisture, that kind of thing. And then, of course, you have the white cedar along the side, and all the different lauriers, laurier poivre, and all of them that were featured in that. So that becomes then this sort of Thai Creole. You also see the props, the main props there, propping the house down. Now we have to remember, and I'm dealing with that slowly along, that, okay, we talk about the TKI in the urban areas, but the TKI exists also in the countryside, among what was called at the time peasant proprietors. These are people who owned their land and were able to invest in a reasonable wooden house, a firm wooden house. And all of the other elements that come into play, the mortise and tenon joints that are locked with wooden pegs, that's a key component, because in the TKI, a real, genuine one, in Roseau or anywhere else, is held together by pegs in the mortise and tenon joints, so that you can, as they did, actually move the entire house. There are photographs, for those who can't remember, or not old enough to remember, dragging the entire house through the streets of Roseau, with all of the social chanting and songs and all that went with it. And so they had to be strong enough. And even in hurricanes, they would topple over. We have photographs of Hurricane David where they're out in the middle of the street in Pottersville, and they're still standing, you know. There was a woman, it's all built up in Castle Comfort now, called Etta, and she had this fantastic four-poster bed, I mean huge four-poster bed, which was half the house. And I came down from Girodella, I went up to Girodella, I came down after the hurricane. I was so tempted to ask her, when you were selling the bed? And she told me it's the bed that she and her husband sat on in the middle of the hurricane, and the whole house flew 50 yards and landed undamaged because of the pegs. And then I collected food. I was working for Red Cross at the time, and I went and I triumphantly brought her some supplies. I said, but Etta, where is the bed? Oh, a Frenchman came away and he gave me $500. And the bed went to Martinique. Well, we'll hear some other Martinique stories in a moment, because a lot of our furniture ended up in Martinique. But up there you see the movement of air through the house. The raising of the house is extremely important for the air to pass through. And then there's a little diagram right over at the end where the house enlarges. So you have your 2 rooms, and maybe as you develop or you have more children or whatever, you would add on rooms. Sometimes with a slanting roof, but also we have some examples in Roseau and Collyhoo of another TKI being attached to it. So you end up with 2 or 3 roofs with valleys in between. And that would be a way of expanding your house. The tools that are used are extremely interesting. Homemade planes, these actually are imported, but you know, you do get some samples of all. The only thing that was imported was the blade, and the rest was made out of one of the hardwoods like balata or stuff. And the ogre, this one at the top, there for digging out the holes to be able to fit the pegs. And all of these things. That drill there and the other drill, your adze for shaping, and of course the planes for planing the wood. All of this wood, we must remember, is pre-chainsaw. And this was the method of cutting wood on the chantier. And you made your frame, you dragged the wood across, and you had these real powerful men below and above, hal low, and once again, all the songs and the chants that went with it. There's this amazing musicologist from the United States, he's dead now, Alan Lomax. I mean, he is one of the most amazing characters. You know, he would get, in the Deep South, he would get black men who had been incarcerated out of jail just because of their music. He would use all the manipulations to get them out. Anyway, in the early 1960s, 162, he came to Dominica, and he recorded, it's all there, you can get it nowadays, he recorded these amazing things, whether it was hauling boats, but there's a wonderful one for cutting wood. And all these guys in La Plaine is where he recorded it. And they have the gates knocking, and the guys are pulling up and pulling down, and the others are chanting. And it all is in time with the song, to encourage it. So there's a whole history and a whole social life that goes with the production of this wood and all of the preparation of it and that kind of thing. And so that is why you will find that, for instance, the frame of most of these small houses are made of the hardest possible woods that can be found. Balata, carapet, that kind of thing. So you have your frame, but then you use other woods for the boards. And here is a standard plan of the traditional tika. This was done by a Guadeloupean architect and a team to produce a study not only Dominica but throughout the Eastern Caribbean. And this is the pattern of one of the Dominica houses. So you have your two rooms essentially, and the roof pattern with slope, and the half hip or bonnet roof, which is an important feature of Dominican architecture. Not only in these small houses, but even in the larger houses as well. Jack Bethelot, poor guy, he was blown up in a car. He was an independence person in Guadeloupe, and nobody knows whether he was carrying a bomb or somebody wanted to silence him, like Walter Rodney, and he was blown up. And he did all this wonderful work. So here we have a section of Roseau. This is King George V Street. Those 3 and further houses have been taken up by A.C. Shillingford and Company. A.C. Shillingford bought out the small Tikai lots and demolished them, and then built A.C. Shillingford with the Albert Hall above, which was, it was A.C. Shillingford, Albert, whatever Shillingford. So it was the Albert Hall, which also reflected the Albert Hall in London. And then the A.C. Shillingford Phoenix is downstairs, and those Tikais gone. Next, it's all concrete now with a touch of Art Deco in the veranda. That was the big house. And there you see it's kind of an enlarged Tikai, the frame. All they have done is sort of extended the measurement, the roof. And then further up, you have the one that still exists, 2 of them that still exist. Miss Robbins' place there, and the further one, I think it belongs to the Methodist Church. And so you go up, and you realize that Roseau was subdivided into these Tikais. Essentially, the bigger houses were on the first 3 streets from the bay, those larger houses, and then beyond, the whole town was subdivided into these Tikais. We have a fine example here. Unfortunately, it's gone. This is from Kundi Street, but there again, it's now raised up, and there was a little shop. That has been completely demolished, not by hurricane or anything, by manpower, and what I call Goodwill style concrete is up there instead. There's a Goodwill style concrete there. So that is an example in the country villages. And I'm going to go into Collyho, which is wonderful. People drive past Collyho and they don't know what's inside Collyho. It's just so fantastic. Yeah? So